Welcome to our Liechtenstein Financial Services podcast. In the Liechtenstein Financial Services podcast, we primarily explore the legal, regulatory and tax perspectives of banks, funds, asset managers and other participants in the Liechtenstein Financial Center, and it is a production of PwC Liechtenstein. I'm Patrick Wich, your host, 11 years of experience at PwC, specializing in auditing and consulting of banks and other financial service institutions, and today we are discussing a very interesting and complex topic of ESG risk management for financial institutions. In the episode, we dive into the EBA guidelines on the management of environmental, social and governance risks. These guidelines are critical for all financial institutions in integrating ESG risks into their risk management processes. And it's a great pleasure to have Sophia Shakar, Senior Manager at PwC, today with us. Welcome, Sophia.
Thank you, Patrick. It's a great pleasure also from my side to be here and talk about this important topic.
Awesome. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your connection to Liechtenstein?
Sure. I am part of our Sustainability and Strategic Regulatory team here at PwC, and I'm specialized in advising financial institutions in Switzerland, EU, and of course also Liechtenstein on their sustainability journey with more than 8 years of experience in the area. And one topic in particular is how financial institutions can integrate sustainability risk into their risk management framework, the governance strategy, in the most efficient way, of course.
Awesome, yeah, and thanks for being with us today and sharing your experience, because I know you are integrating and consulting about that topic with many banks at the moment, right? So let's start the discussion. So what are the key objectives of the new EBA guidelines on the management of ESG risks, Sophia?
So the EBA guidelines are designed to support financial institutions in managing ESG risks across different areas. The main goal is to set minimum standards and reference methodologies for the identification, measurement, management and monitoring of ESG risks. This includes assessing risks that are related not only to climate change, but also broader environmental risks such as nature-related and biodiversity risks, as well as social and governance risks. It's important to know that these guidelines are mandated directly as part of the new EU banking package that was introduced earlier last year and includes various specific requirements on the integration of ESG risks for credit institutions through amendments of the Capital Requirements Directive and Regulation.
Okay, good, Sophia, thank you. And what are the key requirements of the EBA guideline?
So first of all, the guidelines require ESG risks to be integrated into the existing risk management framework. They are potential drivers of all traditional categories, such as credit, market, operational risk, and other traditional risk categories. This means selecting and implementing different methodologies, including scenario analysis and stress testing, to evaluate, quantify, and mitigate these risks. It's also required to have a robust and sound approach to managing ESG risks over different time horizons, so specifically short, medium, and long term. This is mandated. Furthermore, institutions are expected to embed ESG risks in their regular processes, such as in the risk appetite, the internal controls, and even in the internal capital adequacy assessment process, the ICAP. In addition, ESG risks should be integrated into the overall business and risk strategies, including strategic objectives and risk appetite.
Okay, interesting. So you talked about ICAP, ILAB, you talked about new regulations, integration into the traditional risk management. I believe ESG data plays a critical role in all of this, right?
Absolutely. The guidelines explicitly require internal procedures to identify, collect, and structure and analyze the data that is necessary for this assessment, management, and monitoring of ESG risks. And it's important that institutions have rigorous processes, controls, and due diligence frameworks related to the various internal and external ESG data. And this is to ensure high quality of the analysis of the risks, but also to minimize any greenwashing risks.
Interesting. So, Sophia, and the market is also talking a lot about transition planning, right? So, right. What role does this play in all of this?
Well, the guidelines include specific expectations on understanding the sensitivity to ESG risks, in particular environmental transition and physical risks, and this under different scenarios. This is all related to the new requirement under the EU banking package to develop specific plans that include quantifiable targets and processes to monitor and address the ESG financial risks, again, arising in the short, medium, and long term. So the guidelines define the key content of such plans, including strategic objectives and roadmap, targets and metrics, governance and implementation and engagement strategies. They also have specific examples for financial institutions for all of these different areas. And furthermore, and that's the interesting part, it should be ensured that these plans are consistent with other applicable requirements for transition plans, in particular stemming from sustainability reporting, such as CSRD, due diligence, but also the strategic commitments.
Interesting. Okay, so you say this is important to have other plans equipped and embedded into all the strategic considerations. Scenario analysis is typically also something that we hear often in the ESG risk space, right?
That's true.
Is this included in the guidelines as well?
Well, scenario analyses are, of course, very important. They're a key tool for assessing the impact of ESG risks on financial institutions. And for this reason, there is a separate set of guidelines that EBA is developing that focus on the step for scenario analysis, testing financial resilience through climate stress tests, and also challenging business model resilience through climate resilience analysis.
Yeah, so that's the long-term perspective.
That's
very
the long-term.
good. Yeah. And how should financial institutions, in particular in Liechtenstein, approach the implementation of these guidelines from your perspective?
So for financial institutions in Liechtenstein, the key is to adapt their risk management frameworks to align with the EBA guidelines and the EU banking package overall. So institutions, they need to begin by performing a gap analysis that would be recommended to understand really what is their status quo, what are the gaps towards being compliant, and how to approach it in the best way. And what we recommend is to do this analysis together with other relevant regulatory and strategic requirements, such as, for example, the Pillar 3 disclosures on ESG risks, or also in Switzerland, the FINMA circular on nature-related risks. This is important to ensure an efficient approach in the implementation by identifying any synergies between the different frameworks and how to approach the most efficient way the implementation. Then as a second step, the institutions should define the required gap closing measures and prioritize them from a regulatory but also from strategic perspective. So it's very important to have defined your ambition level on this. And in the implementation phase, it's recommended for institutions to follow a pragmatic approach in strengthening their risk management framework. They should consider integration of ESG risk across all relevant business units, so identification and selection of methodologies, definition of necessary data points, the key risk indicators, of course, risk appetite, very important, but also development of controls and incorporation into the external and internal risk reporting.
Yeah, this sounds like a huge book of work, actually,
Yeah.
that is in front of the banks in Liechtenstein and the EU in general. And when do financial institutions in Liechtenstein need to implement and comply with all of these new guidelines?
So in the EU, the EBA guidelines will apply starting from 11th of January 2026, except for small and non-complex institutions which have one additional year transitional period. In Liechtenstein, the application date is dependent on the incorporation of the banking package into the EEA agreement and then the subsequent incorporation into local law. But due to the complexity of the requirements, it is really recommended for financial institutions in Liechtenstein to start with the implementation as soon as possible, because our experience shows that such projects typically take considerable time and also considerable resources to implement. And compliance with these regulations will, of course, ensure that Liechtenstein's financial sector remains competitive and aligned with international standards.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so 2026 comes soon, Sophia, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of noise about the omnibus proposal at the moment in the market. But from your perspective, should banks stop thinking about ESG, or especially in the light of these EBA guidelines, continue their journey in this direction?
No, not at all. We see where the journey is going, and especially in from a risk perspective, ESG risks are here to stay. They're not going anywhere. So it's like independent of any reporting requirements. And also, financial institutions should not forget that there are other ESG risk-related reporting requirements, such as the Pillar 3 disclosures, and they haven't been changed. They're still there.
Yeah, I agree. The omnibus proposal is just focusing on the top of the iceberg then when it comes to reporting, but all the important parameters at the bottom, or like all the organizations and structures and processes, as you pointed out, are similarly important, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Sophia, that was very insightful. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me here.
Fantastic. And look, from this basis, we will dive into new topics such as legal, regulatory, or other topics in future episodes. So please stay tuned for upcoming episodes. And in the meantime, contact us, contact Sophia for a personal exchange on how Liechtenstein can fit into your agenda.